world's best. I don't believe that for a moment. No, the world's best Coke Zero drinker. This is brought to you by Coke Zero. But Deloitte bought the Coke Zero, so ultimately it's brought to you by Deloitte. So, hi friends. I am concerned that maybe the people in the room here are not developers because it is 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And you know that developers do not go anywhere before 10 o'clock. So I'm worried maybe you are business people or marketing people disguised as developers. My name is Scott Hanselman. You can go and search for me on the internet and you'll find all kinds of things, including my podcast. I'm very proud of my podcast and I would encourage you to check it out. It's a really great show with over 600 episodes. I've been doing it every Thursday for 12 years. It also has lots of transcripts, so if your English is not so good and I talk too fast, you can follow along. It's really great. I also have another great show called This Developer's Life, which is about stories of developers, and I would encourage you to check it out, and they make me very happy. Now, I have an apology. I do work for Microsoft. But I don't actually work in Seattle, where the Microsoft headquarters are. I work remotely on the forest moon outside the reality distortion field that is Seattle. And I work in open source, which makes it like less evil. When I went to work at Microsoft the first time, people said that I was a sellout because I was an open source person. And then I go and I work at this big company and they're like, oh, you know, now you're just trying to get all that money and you're going to be famous and rich. And it hurt my feelings. It made me really sad. And there was a time when I didn't know how I was going to deal with that because it was very painful time. Because before I worked at Microsoft, I was just like in an IT crowd. But after Microsoft, it's so much better. Microsoft it's a new Microsoft, of course, but we have the same org chart as before. It's pretty straightforward. Now, what I want to talk to you about today is a true story about a time when I was at Intel, and I met a very nice woman who was one of the early engineers at Intel designing the microprocessors. So this is someone at Intel with a very low employee number, like employee 30 or 40. This is someone who had been developing for 40 years. So as long as I'd been alive, this person had been developing. And I was giving a talk on web development. And this person came up to me afterwards and said, I'd like to learn how to be a web developer. And I thought that was a really interesting question. Because this person was such a professional and had been doing development for so long, I was like, what can I teach you? You already know all these things. But it turns out this person was a low-level microcode, internals of the processor developer and not a web person. So it got me thinking, how could we look at the internet or teach someone the internet in 2017 if they had missed out on the last 20 years? They skipped out on all the bad parts. Now, I don't have a picture of this person from Intel, but I do have a picture of my dad taking a selfie. Just to give you a sense of the generation gap, this was an older person, maybe 100, 200 years old, very, very old. Now, I said I'm going to talk to you about the difference between the cloud on the back end and the browser on the front end. So first we'll talk about the cloud. Now there's a quote, a very famous quote that says there's maybe a market for 5 computers. This is one of those quotes that you can't really be sure of, There's a lot of quotes on the internet. And you know that Abraham Lincoln said you can't trust quotes on the internet. I don't know who Thomas Watson is. I think that he was the president of IBM, and I could not find a picture of Thomas Watson. But I do have a really old book, so I'm just going to say that that's the guy. I have no idea if that's the guy or not. Now, when they said that there's a market for 5 computers, what kind of computers were they talking about? They were talking about those refrigerator computers, like mainframes. And they thought there would be like one for Europe and one for South America, and then you'd sell 5 computers, and that would be, the end of it, right? And then, of course, with Brexit, they probably want their own computer, so maybe 6 computers, right? But these were big, giant, room-sized computers. Well, it turns out that that actually happened, except they're not refrigerators, they're clouds. So there's the Azure computer and the Google computer, and there's a popular bookstore that has a computer. I understand that they're doing well. I brought you a picture of the Azure cloud, the Microsoft Azure cloud. We're a little behind, but we do have color now, which is really nice. And we've been starting to work with containers, so we're bringing new containers into the Azure cloud all the time. So you should feel good about using Azure. Now, I was talking to the person from Intel, and I said, well, the thing about the cloud that's so amazing is virtual machines and how operating systems work. And I said, do you know this diagram here? This is the characteristics of an operating system. For something to be an operating system, it has to have memory management and storage and networking. And if it has all those things, it's an operating system and it sits on top of hardware. And of course, the person from Intel said, yes, I know that. I invented it. So that was awkward. But of course, I felt the need to mansplain, so I just continued explaining this. What was so interesting about it was that not that an operating system sits on hardware, but the virtualization of it that's so exciting. And this was something that my friend at Intel had missed out on, the idea that you put the machine into a virtualized environment and the machine doesn't know that it's inside the matrix, right? When you're inside the matrix, you don't know you're inside the matrix, and that's so powerful. And I asked her, how do you get virtual machines today at Intel? And she said, well, you have to fill out a fax form, and you fax a request to IT, and then IT will look at that request, and then they will give you a virtual machine with a fax machine. So you have like the latest virtual machine technology and a fax. I don't know why they didn't use like carrier pigeons, or maybe they could put a request for a virtual machine on a bird and just send the bird out into the world and then the virtual machine would come back. I was trying to explain the difference between just having a virtual machine and the cloud. The cloud is an elastic thing. It's the ability to go and say, I want a Jenkins virtual machine, so I have a little command that I type, and I go to the command prompt and I type in Azure VM create, and then it has ASCII art, which is cool, which means that Microsoft is not evil, and it then makes your virtual machine. So the ability to programmatically create a virtual machine is the magic of the cloud. The cloud isn't just hosting. It's not just machines that you can't see. It's an elastic environment. Now, I did a lot of work in the 90s, and I'm kind of an older developer. I've been developing for 25 years. So my CV, my resume is 3 pages. You know how they tell you you should have a 1-page CV? I'm fancy. I have a 3-page CV. The second page of my CV, page 2, is just how to make a web farm, how to scale out a web farm. Because I spent most of like 1993 to 2003 learning to scale web farms. This was a time when we were trying to figure those things out. Round-robin DNS and web farms where you have multiple computers all talking together. We were learning those things. So I've got a whole page of my resume. Now I meet people here at this wonderful conference that are maybe 26, and I say, do you know how to use a web farm? And they say, sure. You take the slider bar, and you go like that. So now I have a 2-page resume. Page 2 is gone. 10 years of my life is a checkbox. I'm a little upset about that. And then when I go and I scale a web farm from the command line, it's even worse because they're teasing me. Look, updating a server farm. It used to take me a week to update a server farm, and now I just push enter. And the young people on my team are like, ugh, this is taking like a minute. Bleh. This sucks. The cloud. Bleh. I'm not bitter, though. But I'm a little bit bitter. All of the 90s are a slider bar, so yes, I'm a little bit upset. And the worst part is that people who move that slider bar, they don't know what's going on. They move the slider bar and they go, what just happened? Magic. The exciting part here, though, isn't that I'm sad about my now 2-page resume, but the exciting part is that when I was talking to the person in Intel, she doesn't have to worry about that anymore. I can complain, but what a joy that I can say, we understand how to scale a server farm now. It's a best practice. So rather than me being sad about my young friends, I can be happy that they can work on something else. Solved that problem. We've solved that. And the cloud has solved that problem, which is really exciting. Then my friend at Intel said, what language should I use to talk to the cloud? You have to use Java or Ruby or PHP? And I just said, anything but PHP. You can use whatever language makes you happy. I'm just kidding. You can use PHP. A good cloud doesn't care about language choice. She can use whatever makes her happy. And she couldn't believe that. She thought that was amazing. A good cloud is open source. A good cloud lets you go and see how you're talking to the cloud, and you can use PHP or Python or Ruby or Node or Erlang or whatever. So that was exciting. She thought she'd have to use Java or use C#. She could use whatever made her happy. Again, this is an up-leveling. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who have built computers, built virtualization, and now built the cloud. And this allows us to think about the cloud in a way that we couldn't before. Now, I was at a conference in Denmark with a gentleman who was the chief architect of Netflix at the time. I don't have a picture of him, but I do have a picture of John Malkovich, the actor. So this gentleman came out to the stage and described how they were switching from regular hard drives to SSDs. So from spinning rust, computers you can hear, versus like an SSD, a solid state drive. And they were using a term called IOPS, right? Input operations per second. It's that number that the cloud uses to keep track of how fast it is. And the deal was that it was like $1 for 300 IOPS or $3 for 3,000 IOPS. So it was 3 times more money for 30 times more performance. Now this gentleman comes out, and he was amazing. He's the chief architect of Netflix, and he's also English, which is cool, and that gives him +2 charisma, just for, hello, I'm from Netflix. Oh, he's English, so fantastic. And he comes out and he talks about how they switched over to SSDs. Amazing talk. Afterwards, a person comes up and questions them. Questioning is sometimes good, but this person came up and said, well, actually, the SSDs are extremely unreliable, and basically told a whole story about how their laptop died, and SSDs are not reliable, and you, chief architect of Netflix, are stupid because SSDs will crash more often, and then it will ruin Netflix. And the Englishman listened the entire time and was very peaceful and very thoughtful, and the person asking the question said, what do you think about that? That's a problem, don't you think? And I don't know how to do a Danish accent, so that was just the best I could do. He said, that's not my problem, I'm renting them. Think about that. Yeah, SSDs fail more, maybe. Not his problem. He's renting them. It's a whole other level. It's a whole other level. Now, here's the part that was interesting. We were shocked. This young person was destroyed. But they didn't know it. They just stood there. It was like a ninja movie where the ninja does the thing where they go, shunk, and then the head is cut like this, and then the brain falls off, and then the body is just kind of sitting there like this. And should we push the body over? What should we do? This guy completely destroyed. It's not my problem. I'm renting them. It's Amazon's problem. If all the SSDs go bad, is that Netflix's problem? No, it's Amazon's. Now, I don't have a picture of when this happened, but I do have a picture of John Malkovich hitting a grenade with the backside of a gun back into the guy who asked the question. That's basically what happened. You can kind of visualize how awesome that was. Because they're right. They're right. We are thinking about things at a higher level. If you're thinking about the cloud correctly, hopefully you're not SSHing or shushing into your Linux machines. I'm trying to make that a thing. Shushing. You can shush into a computer. So maybe you can just use that at work and see if it happens. Maybe it'll catch on. Just do it casually, though. Just say, yeah, I'm going to go and shush into the computer there. And then if enough people do it, then it'll become famous. So this person at Netflix is a cloud architect. And a cloud architect, they're not shushing into production. They have a big map of the world. That's how you know you're a startup. You're a good startup. You have a map of the world with green dots. Even if the green dots don't do anything, you should just make a map at your company, put it up, and just put green dots on it. And then when people say, what kind of company do you have? You say, we're global. Right? You need a good dashboard like that, right? Because you want to think about your company and your apps, not about your hard drives, okay? This is a great picture of the Azure Dashboard. It's got all kinds of bars and charts and stuff. That's a proper cloud dashboard. Now, I've seen some of your dashboards, and they're not so nice. And I've also seen some of you tell me that this is a dashboard. That's not a dashboard. And I don't like it when people who are maybe resistant to change, they don't like the idea the cloud is going to take their job. And they go, this is a good enough dashboard for me. And then you force them to upgrade to the latest, all right, fine, I'll upgrade to the new dashboard, fine, I'll use HTOP because it's got color. This is not a cloud dashboard, right? There's certain facts and physics in the world. The sky is blue, water is wet. This is not a cloud dashboard. And Mario is not the better Mario brother. It's Luigi. Luigi is better. He's superior Mario brother. You can't tell me that Mario is a better. I mean, it's always been Luigi. I just want to make sure you're paying attention. So the cloud offers us elasticity, flexibility. It allows us to stand on the shoulders of giants and scale. It allows us to focus on more important things. There was a time when I was the cloud. I was the cloud. My boss would say, can you scale the web farm? And that meant I had to go and buy the hardware and put it in the rack and plug in the cables. And that was DevOps, right? And now DevOps is pressing enter. And that's fine, and I'm not bitter. But it allows the business to be at a higher level. So I told that to my friend at Intel, and she thought that was great. She could pick the language that made her happy. She could pick the cloud that made her happy. And she could not worry about things like round-robin DNS and web farms. The cloud had been a solved problem. So that was a great thing. Now we turned our attention to the browser to think about this diagram again. This diagram, again, is the characteristics of an operating system and all of the things one would need to be called an operating system. Now, there was a time in the past where you would sit down in front of a computer that looked like this, and you would go and talk to a refrigerator that looked like this, one of the 5 computers. And you would load up your program, and then you would load up your program, and it would run on the computer over here, remember? And that computer over there didn't do any work. It's a different layer of abstraction. Who did the work? The work is happening on the refrigerator. But computers are getting more and more and more powerful, but we still are pushing angle brackets across the wire and waiting for them to be rendered. The refrigerator is still doing a lot of the work. We're going to talk a little bit about that because understanding different layers of abstraction is fundamental. Now, when Tim Berners-Lee created the internet with his friends, this is actually the first page of the internet. It's actually still there at the exact location. And in fact, there used to be a computer under Tim's desk that said, "The internet, do not turn off." He could actually push his chair in too fast and kick it and shut off the internet. When he came up with this, he was thinking this would be like an infinite book, and you would go around in this hypermedia book. He wasn't thinking about Angular. He wasn't thinking about things in terms of an application platform. And he's a very modest developer. I've seen and received a lot of your business cards. A lot of you have very fancy business cards with senior certified web engineer, comma, MCSE, comma, Cisco certified, comma, A+, etc. Do you know what Tim Berners-Lee's title is? Web developer. And this is really important because he didn't put the. And he could have. If he was not modest, he would have just said the web developer. And then what would you say on your I also surf the web? That would be my title. There's literally nothing else you could say. All I have ever wanted to do is become senior. I can't become senior because he's the. When he created the internet, he didn't know that it was going to turn into an application platform. He also didn't understand the limitations of HTML itself. Some of the limitations, of course, are the fidelity. You can't really create a perfect, good-looking book in HTML, at least you couldn't 20 years ago, so you would use things like PDFs. PDFs, portable documents, were an attempt to fix the web. Seems like we're always trying to fix the web. Tim Berners-Lee could never have expected that. How could he know that PDF would become the 5th most popular religion on the planet? I was going to convert to PDF. I became Greek Orthodox instead, but I was so close to becoming PDF, and just maybe next time. That's a good one, huh? Yeah. Good night, everybody. So then we were surfing the web, we were moving around the web, and then this happened. How did you know that that happened? Because you were surfing the web and you were clicking around, and then Java loaded, and that was great. And then these guys were like, we can do it too, whee! And then these guys were like, but we've got YouTube. That's a reason to download our toolbar and plugin thing. But think about it from the perspective of the web developer. Why did we do this? What's the historical context of this? It's because we desperately wanted this. We wanted our computers back. We wanted plug-in virtual machines. We wanted graphics and threadings and memory management because the web didn't provide it. JavaScript wasn't ready. HTML was a document format. So we desperately wanted these little islands of interactivity. And I recently went to Toyota, because I have a Toyota car, and I went to the Toyota to get my oil changed. And I'm a developer, you're all developers. I assume that you're like me, where you go to the shop where they have their computers and you lean on the kiosk and you want to know what kind of software they're running. And you're like, hey, that's kind of cool. And then eventually you find yourself on the other side of the kiosk learning the hotkeys of how to talk to that. I do that when I'm at the airport. I want to know what computers they're running, right? They used to have a terminal. They would terminal into an older AS400, an older computer, like a big mainframe type thing. I recently went to Toyota and they had a new system. And the person there knows me and they were really excited to talk to me about it. And they said, oh, we got a new computer, it's amazing. Check it out. It's like a Dell. He turns it on and he opens up Windows XP. And I was like, like do I? All right, I just won't say anything. So he opens up Windows XP and he opens up Firefox. And then he opens up a Java jar file from the desktop. And then Java says, are you sure you want to run Java? And then you're like, yes. And then it says, please sign your full name if you want to use Java. And you sign yes. And then it says, the government says running Java in an applet is a really bad idea. Please sign your name and then give a sample of your blood. And so then he launches the Java applet, and it was a terminal emulator that launched back to the same mainframe. And he looked me in the eye and he said, this is way better than the system that we had before. What are we doing to our users? Why would we teach them that? Why would we teach them that it's okay to have this wonderful HTML document and then this little area of interactivity that isn't quite a machine, and then have them run terminal emulators? This happens all the time. Now, while the web is developing, and as I'm explaining it to my friend at Intel, JavaScript happens. I remember the first time that JavaScript happened, and it confused me because I thought it was this. Right? Don't do that. Java people hate that. JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. It's literally called that because it's fun to say Java. Oh, Java, 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 Java. Oh, JavaScript. Ah. And that's just, it was actually called LiveScript, and it was written in a weekend. It's just a trash language. But here it is, and this is the thing. Remember the first time you saw JavaScript do something useful? Some of us will remember. For some of us, we're young enough to remember JavaScript was always in our life. But for people just a little bit older, you remember the very first time, and it probably went something like, I was filling out a form, I put in my phone number, and I pushed tab. And then the form went red. And I went, I don't think it validated that on the server. I think it validated it on the client. And then you type the number again, and you hit tab, and it changes again. And you said, JavaScript is doing logic on the client. Computer up, I ripped my computer up, and I ran across the room. Oh my God, it's validating on the client. And my wife was like, I don't care. And then I ran over to my boss, and like, this is amazing. He's like, I don't care. JavaScript is amazing. So then I started to work with JavaScript. So then I built this flow chart of what it's like to work with JavaScript. You know how JavaScript is. JavaScript. So the first time I saw JavaScript do something useful, I knew that this was going to be interesting. And I started to make sure that my name, when I filled out forms, was alert, pwned, so that I would find out whether people were validating their JavaScript. But then other people would do things like build emulators to prove that JavaScript was possible. There was a time when we used to have to convince our bosses that JavaScript was a useful thing. You would have to go to your boss and say, I think we can do JavaScript on this website. And your boss would say, I just don't think JavaScript's ready. It's not time yet, because of, it was usually Internet Explorer's fault at some point. But people were building things like emulators. And how far could they go? Well, they could go pretty darn far, actually. Someone did this, which I was pretty surprised about. I'm inside of Chrome right now. I'm loading up a web page, and it says loading, and it is going across our glorious internet here. And you can make sure that it's real, that it's really JavaScript. Anytime someone shows you something, you just select it and then right-click, because you want to find out if they're trying to tease you that it might be Flash, because that's cheating. Right? If you select it, you know it's real. This is a real emulator of Linux. This is a full-on emulator in JavaScript. So I'm emulating a Pentium machine, and I can actually go and run TCC, and right here I'm going to use a C compiler. So I'm in Windows, in Chrome, in a JavaScript environment inside of Linux, now running a C compiler so that I can say hello world. Now, one time I did this in another European city, and I thought it was exciting. I expected applause. I got nothing, much like today. And someone yelled out, "Why didn't you use GCC, you Microsoft person?" I'm in Windows, in Chrome, in a JavaScript environment doing a C compiler, and you're complaining about my choice of C compiler. So I was trying to think, how could I make this person feel as bad as possible? So what I did is I then launched an iPhone emulator on Windows, and then loaded mobile Safari, and then loaded Linux inside of that and compiled a C compiler. Because you want to see how deep you can go. Like at this point, I should open another virtual machine and see if opens up into a wormhole or something. It's like Inception, right? Remember Inception and what Inception was about? Inception was about if you open a virtual machine inside another virtual machine, time slows down, right? So then your boss says, well, does it work without JavaScript? No. No, it doesn't. If you disable JavaScript, you will die. Why would you ask that? This is like the same when your boss says, will it work without cookies? No, of course it won't work without cookies. Well, then Europe says cookies are bad, and then now it has to work without cookies. So thank you, Europe. America can take credit for a lot of really bad things in the world, but the cookie thing is on you people. In fact, you should probably all just click OK before I finish talking. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I might not issue a cookie right now, and that's a whole thing. But thank you for that. So then people started making games in JavaScript. This is actually a port of an iPad game written entirely in JavaScript that's absolutely amazing. You can take things like full 3D AAA games and run them inside of JavaScript inside of your browser. You can take C++ and compile it with something like Clang through a thing called Inscription and use a thing called asm.js and talk to OpenGL and make a real example. Full-on AAA, run Quake, run Doom entirely in JavaScript. Now at this point in the talk, most people think that I'm going to then do a demo of Doom in the browser. No, not going to do it because it's cheap. I'm not going to do a cheap demo for you. I respect you too much. Instead of running Doom in the browser, I think it's only appropriate that we do something more relatable, more realistic. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to launch a web VR simulation of my parents' basement. And then inside that, run Windows for Workgroups. And then inside that, run Solitaire. Entirely in JavaScript. You can see the Cheetos and the Fritos. Somewhere in here there's a Pepsi Max. This is real. That is entirely written in JavaScript and web VR, all in the browser. Keep in mind that all the while your boss is asking, is JavaScript mature enough to do the kind of work here we do at the company? Yeah, it is. You can do amazing stuff. In fact, I would propose if you take the diagram from before and you overlay the characteristics of JavaScript, you will find that JavaScript, the language, is an operating system. It has garbage collection, it has a little SQL Server database, it's got events and callbacks and sockets. All the things one would need to be called an operating system is living inside of the browser right there. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but it's interesting, especially when you apply Atwood's Law. Atwood's Law says that any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. This is interesting and might, in fact, prove that JavaScript is an operating system. But unfortunately, I have also determined that Microsoft Excel is also an operating system. And to prove that, I've brought a complete Pac-Man emulator written entirely in JavaScript where each cell and pixel is a single cell. And this is actually such an amazing and perfect Pac-Man emulator, again, written entirely in Excel, that it can't be stopped. So this is going to run till the end of time. Do you all do Halloween here? No? You don't dress up like and then go and yell at your neighbors for candy? No? You're missing out. It's great. Free candy. I actually went as Microsoft Outlook. I got a curtain, just an opaque curtain, and I got a sign at the top that says not responding. And I just walked around and I refused to speak to anyone. That's what you're going to clap for? I just ran a complete virtual machine. You are a savage crowd. I just brought a simulation of my parents' basement and ran Windows inside it, and you clap for the Outlook joke. On behalf of Microsoft, I apologize. In fact, Excel is so powerful that there was a time in a music video when Kelly Rowland, one of Beyonce's singers, texted her boyfriend from Excel. So to be clear, don't ever question how powerful Excel is. Back to the web, though. There's two operating systems, aren't there? There's the mobile one that you have, and then there's the browser. And that's why it's so important to think about mobile performance, like Estelle's talks yesterday, to think about responsive design. Yes, native apps are great, but it's going to constantly be a thumb war between the open web and native apps. Do not ever question that the web will probably win. Now we say HTML5, that's one of those overarching terms that people use to refer to today's modern web, HTML5. But when they say HTML5, they mean CSS, JavaScript, and HTML altogether, right? This can be confusing. A lot of times you wonder, how do I know if it's HTML5 or just regular HTML? So I made a quick quiz. If you try it out in Internet Explorer and it doesn't work, it's HTML5. That's how you know. Now there was a time when I was growing up when HTML tables were the most advanced thing in the internet. You had to have a PhD or an advanced graduate degree to understand HTML tables. And I would go and get jobs entirely based on my ability to know tables. You'd go to the interview and you say, hey, do you know tables? Yes. Boom, junior engineer. You'd work there for 2 or 3 years, and then you would learn row span. And then you would be like the senior engineer. You're like, hey, it's pretty good. But now I go to these amazing web pages. Someone will show me their CSS pen or their code pen, and I'll go view source, and it's like a div. Gmail, if you go to Gmail, you open it up, it's just a div. I don't know how they do it. It's a miracle. Turns out that HTML is just the structure. HTML5 is the simplest HTML ever. It's CSS that does all the work to make it attractive. It's the color, it's the style. And CSS is so powerful and so expressive that you can get exactly what you want the very first time with CSS. Now, I brought mugs for everybody. This is like some swag. I'm going to pass them out later. But I couldn't get the CSS perfect on the mug. So I went and I talked to my friend Estelle in the front row here so she could help me fix this mug. And I'm not really 100% sure that she fixed it perfectly, but it's close. So once we fix those, we'll be giving out the mugs to everybody. Okay? But then you use JavaScript for everything else. JavaScript, this new operating system, isn't it? Here's some video of me learning JavaScript for the very first time. JavaScript is so great that now you don't even need to learn the bad parts. Now there's this great book called Secrets of a JavaScript Ninja by John Resig. He wrote jQuery. And I went and I bought this book and I said, this is an amazing book. Why is there a picture of a samurai on the cover of Secrets of a JavaScript Ninja? So I called John Resig and I said, hey, John Resig, why is there a picture of a samurai on Secrets of a JavaScript Ninja? And he says, that's because JavaScript is loosely typed. Ninja, samurai, duck typing. I apologize for that joke. Now, one of our great philosophers once said that JavaScript is the assembly language of the web. Do you remember who that was? That was me. That was me. But it was also everyone else because it's true, right? So when I said this, I went on Reddit and I said it, and of course, you know, the internet is so nice and welcoming. And Reddit thought that was a great idea. So then they all attacked me, and they're like, oh, you're full of crap. That's bad. JavaScript is not an assembly language. You're insane. I said this like 6 years ago. So I went and I found the creators of JavaScript. I went and I talked to the inventor of JavaScript. I went and found him, and I said, hey, that is, who's that guy? Bastard? What's his? Barcolis? Oh, girls, Barcolis! I never realized he invented JavaScript. That is amazing. In fact, Brendan Eich, that's Brendan Eich, he invented Barcolis. He invented JavaScript. But Barcolis is a good-looking guy, so let's just look at him and not Brendan Eich, right? So he said JavaScript is the x86 of the web. He can't claim it's original. It's one of those ideas that people just have, okay? But it actually happened. Years later, I didn't even know that we made WebAssembly. You can compile into an assembly language, and it's been a thing that is happening across Google and Microsoft and Mozilla. Now, the problem, though, with these layers that we're building, as I was expressing this to my friend from Intel, is if you're not careful, you'll let the layers hide too much. You have to decide when to understand what's underneath. Oftentimes, you'll use something like jQuery, which is fine, but it hides a lot of complexity. And then you think that you're fancy. You're like, hey, I'm using jQuery on this project. It's going to be great. I'm going to do that one again. That was really good. jQuery. jQuery is great. It solves a lot of problems, but you have to remember what happens underneath. The layer underneath is so important. One of the examples that I like to give about understanding one layer below can make you a magician. Now, my wife, who's here in the back, speaks 4 languages, maybe 5. She's got a master's degree. She was a finance person. She's a nurse. She's way smarter than I am. But one time she lost her ring down the drain. She said, it's gone. It's gone forever. I've lost it. And I talked to her about how she thinks about plumbing. And it turns out that you turn the water on and the water appears, travels about a half a meter, and then disappears. So her mental model for the water is this much. And that's fine. She's very smart. She's just not plumbing. She thinks I know how to be plumbing. I do not know plumbing. But I do know that under the sink, there's the bendy thing. That's a technical term. So I went under and I pulled the bendy thing out, and then I pull out the ring. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't know you were a plumber. Well, you know, there's a lot of things that I have in common with Barcolis, you know. Do I know more about plumbing than my wife? No. Am I smarter? Clearly not. But I knew one layer more in the call stack. She did jQuery, I did JavaScript. So I decided where the metal was, and I learned a little bit more. And I would encourage web developers to do the same. You don't have to learn all the way down into the microcode that our friend from Intel knows, that expert level processor stuff, but decide where the metal is for you. Now, sometimes people will say that, well, no one even writes JavaScript anymore. They write jQuery. Do you know who said that? jQuery. If you go up to Wikipedia, there's a guy named jQuery. He's an actor. And if you look at the Wikipedia, it says this is about the actor. If you want to learn about the JavaScript library, see jQuery. So I just decided that jQuery said that. The great thing about jQuery is that once you know that jQuery exists, you'll never use jQuery again. You're going to be at a meeting later this week or tomorrow, and you're going to have your boss say, maybe we can use jQuery. And you'll say, I don't know, is he available? He could be working on, he might be on some other movies right now. And then you're going to go to his IMDb page, and you're going to see the movies and shows that jQuery is working on right now. You get this idea in your mind about what you're going to work on, and you have a vision that I'm going to build this amazing thing, and then I'm going to go and build it, and it's not quite the way I pictured it, and I don't really know whose fault it is. It's probably SharePoint's fault. And I feel really bad. Like, I shouldn't have done that. So people should consider using VanillaJS. VanillaJS is an amazing library that people should check out. Let's go out here and let's Google with Bing for... See, I have this really cool tip for you. What I do is I make the home page Bing, and then if I search for stuff, it uses Google. That way you get the best of both worlds. You get the attractive home page, but you can also find things, which is cool. So, and you're going to clap for that one too. That's great. You guys are just horrible people. Just the worst. Greece is so mean. VanillaJS is this great cross-platform framework for building JavaScript. And you can go in here and click the things you want. Like I want animations, and I want arrays, and I want a math library. And it will build the VanillaJS for you. And you'll notice here, it's a little bigger when you zip it up. Just waiting for you to get the joke. When you do it in development time, you just put in the path to VanillaJS, and then when you move into production, you just remove it. Because VanillaJS is not a thing. VanillaJS is just using JavaScript itself, and it's extremely, extremely fast. So you should definitely check out VanillaJS, and you should also check in your sink and your pipes for your wedding ring, because it might be down there. Just one layer below. The thing that I want you to do now is to think about what I said to my friend at Intel, which is to expect more from the web. The web is in a really great place. What a wonderful time for her to say, I'm going to be a web developer. Things actually kind of work well together. CSS does work, JavaScript does work, and we're starting to see things like web VR and WebAssembly. This is a perfect and wonderful time to become a web developer. If you combine that with the cloud, the cloud gives you massive scale and elasticity and your choice of languages. Combine that with the browser that we are forgetting is deceptively powerful. I've got an iPhone here that is a quad processor pocket supercomputer with 2 gigs of RAM and an accelerated 3D card. And most of the time it waits for HTML to come from your refrigerator. Maybe think about putting that machine to work, using CSS3, using some of the accelerated CSS animations, using some smart JavaScript to do sorting and sifting of data on the client side. Remember that your user has a powerful virtual machine, and when I told my friend at Intel, and I would tell you as well, you should learn JavaScript, and then you should learn some systems language on the back end that will allow you to talk to the front end. You've got unlimited virtual machines. You've got a powerful virtual machine in your user's pocket. Maybe consider putting that machine to work, and your cloud won't have to work so hard. So I hope you have a wonderful second day here at this amazing conference. I hope you also know you already know the cloud. You can definitely go program the browser. So go have fun. Thank you.